Right, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. I know it's been a long time since I've made a video, but I had to come back and I had to say something about this operation Raise the English Flag, because this is probably the best thing that I've ever seen in just about 10 years of making YouTube videos and commenting on politics. And why do I say that? I say that because this is the birth of English ethno-nationalism. And this is something which I have campaigned for and struggled for and spoken about since 2020, right? I got involved with the dissident right, with the alt-right back in 2016. I used to make videos. They were posted on the Daily Stormer. I've made all kinds of videos actually. This is probably my 5th or 6th YouTube channel. I'm just saying that a lot of people that are watching this probably know this already, but I mean, time goes by and people forget. New people. I mean, there's a whole new generation now. The Zoomers are now raising the flag essentially. So there are a lot of people around that did not fight in the Great Meme War of 2016. Funnily enough. And that kind of makes me feel old, but that is what it is. But for 10 years, I've been making YouTube videos. And I've had multiple channels shut down. This is probably my 5th or 6th YouTube channel. For the first 4 years, I swallowed the whole kind of alt-right, 4chan, sort of neo-Nazi Germanic nationalism myth of, you know, Hitler did nothing wrong, and we have to, you know, Churchill's an evil person for winning the Second World War, and etc., etc. And I got fed up with it in about 2020 for multiple reasons. Firstly, because I realized that the people of the alt-right were completely dishonest, because they complained about homosexuals, but there were homosexuals in the movement and nobody did anything about it. They complained about the Jewish people, but there were Jews in the alt-right and nobody would do anything about it. So I just thought, well, these people are hypocritical. They're saying one thing on the internet, but in real life, they're not doing anything about the people that they're complaining about. So how are they any different to the Republicans or the Tories? Right? These people will throw abuse at the Republicans and they'll say, oh, you won't do anything about Israel or the Zionists or whatever. But at the very same time, these same people would do nothing about all of the various different Jews and so on and so forth that were in the alt-right. They'd say, no, these guys are okay because they love Adolf Hitler, right? So that was a load of nonsense. I got fed up with that. And then I increasingly got fed up with all the anti-English sentiment that was just being hurled at England. It was just, in particular, there's a video which is on my channel. You can scroll down and find it. But there was a guy called Cultured Thug, and he was very popular in dissident right circles at that time, back in 2020. And you know, I actually didn't find this myself, but somebody sent the clip to me. But there's a clip of him saying, basically, he thinks the English deserve everything they get when it comes to Pakistani rape gangs, right? We deserve it because we won the Second World War and we stopped Adolf Hitler. And so you got this American neo-Nazi saying this horrible thing, and the leaders of the British dissident right said nothing about it. And I was just astonished by this back in 2020. I thought to myself, well, what's going on? Why is everybody so anti-English? And of course, at that time, the Patriotic Alternative appeared, Mark Collett's little political movement, and they banned the Union Jack. They banned the Union Jack and they banned the English flag. And so this led to many questions for me. And I thought, well, I got to start rethinking this whole Second World War thing. So I started looking into it again, because I didn't really look into it the first time. I just watched The Great Story Never Told, and I thought, well, you know, that makes sense, and I just went with it because there's so much going on in the news. It's like, well, we don't really have time to you know, think too hard about what happened in the Second World War because the world's on fire. We've got to deal with what's going on now rather than thinking about the past. But there was such a strong anti-English sentiment on the internet right that I just thought, well, I've got to look at the Second World War again. So that's what I did. And I came to the conclusion that actually, you know, Hitler did start the war, actually, by invading Austria And he did write a book called Mein Kampf where he says he's going to invade a whole bunch of countries. And actually, nobody wanted the war to happen. We did not want a war in England. France didn't want a war. Poland didn't want a war. Austria didn't want a war. Nobody wanted a war. The only person that wanted a war was Hitler. And the war happened because he wanted it. He made it happen. And he could have even gotten away with keeping Austria. But you know, because we all know the story, he took Austria. Neville Chamberlain got on a plane, went and spoke to him, said, please just stop invading countries. Hitler said, okay. Neville Chamberlain comes back to England. He says, great, peace in our time, everybody's happy. And then what happens? Hitler keeps invading countries. And then the thing turned into a massive war. And somehow this is Churchill's fault, right? Somehow this is Churchill's fault. I'm not sure why. But the fact of the matter is that nobody wanted that war to happen. Everybody in Europe was completely exhausted by the First World War because of the carnage of trench warfare. So many people died in the Battle of the Somme. We were scarred by it. We were genuinely traumatized by it in a way which had never really happened in England. I mean, the whole country's covered in war memorials. This is a new thing for us because an entire generation of men just died. So really but there was no will for a war. But it happened because Hitler made it happen. And this is blindingly obvious. So I realized this, and I talked about it on the internet. I ended up getting completely ostracized by the internet right, by the dissident right, because I defended Churchill. And it's like, oh wow, well, you guys really are just neo-Nazis. You say that you're white nationalists, and you are white nationalists, but you don't like the English, really. You're like white nationalists, but you're not English nationalists. What you really are you're Germanic nationalists. And that's what the majority of English I say English, but the ethno-nationalists that live in England back in 2020, that's what they were. They're Germanic nationalists. They're certainly not, you can't even really call them white nationalists because Hitler hated the Slavs. He wanted to enslave them. He killed a lot of Slavic people. He considered them to be subhuman. Slavic people are white, right? So Hitler himself was a Germanic nationalist. You have people like Jonathan Bowden coming out. I like Jonathan Bowden, but he comes out and he says, Germany is the heart of Europe. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, we conquered the world. You know, England conquered the world. The whole world speaks our language now. The whole world follows our culture, our laws, our science. They don't speak German. They speak English. There's more English people in this world than there are Germans. We've got like 60 million in this country, 20 in Canada, another 20 in Australia and New Zealand, and then in America, probably 100 or 150. So it's maybe 200 or 250 million English. We are actually the dominant white ethnicity on this world. And yet Bowden stands there and he's like, oh, Germany, Germany, Germany. It's like, what are you talking about, mate? Like, this is retarded. So all of this came out in 2020. People that follow my channel know this story. Like I say, a lot of new people out there. I know I'm kind of making this whole raise the English flag thing about me, but I got to be honest. I mean, I've got a massive chip on my shoulder. I mean, I'm not going to deny it. I've got a massive chip on my shoulder because I just feel like I'm being proven right. Okay? It's taken 5 years. I got ostracized from the dissident right. I was kicked out for defending Churchill. I was kicked out for saying we need an English ethno-nationalism and we need to get rid of this Nazi stuff, get rid of all this German stuff. We need a proper English ethno-nationalism. And I was rejected because of this. And now here we are in 2025, and the English people are raising the English flag. And this is the birth of English ethno-nationalism. 100%. And this is unstoppable now. As far as I'm concerned, this is not going to stop. Because English people are raising the English flag and the government's taking it down. And putting up a gay flag. Well, they're not actually putting up a gay flag instead, but you know what I mean. The government would never dare to take down a Palestinian flag or a gay flag. a gay pride flag, a rainbow flag. They would never dare. But they'll take down an English flag, right? And the English people have woken up. And they weren't awake like this 5 years ago. I can tell you that. The mood has changed. We all know it. The English are on the march at last. At last, the Englishman has learned to hate, right? I mean, there's another interesting thing, because that poem, Kipling's poem, I forget it off the top of my head, but we all know it, right? The Englishman, something too late, but the Englishman has come to hate, right? This is written by Kipling against the Germans, because apparently in the First World, don't quote me on this, I'm not going to double check it, but as my understanding is, in the First World War, his son died fighting the Germans. And so when he was talking about the English came to hate, he was talking about hatred of the Germans for the war. Now, of course, the ethno-nationalists in England can't tolerate this because it's anti-Germanic, so they've got to spin it around. So that's why on the internet for so many years, people have changed the poem, and they've changed it to the Saxon begins to hate. You see what I mean? It's funny, isn't it? But the real original poem was the English begin to hate. And this is what started to happen. The penny has dropped. The cat is out of the bag, and it's not getting back in the bag anytime soon. And people are fed up. And this is the birth of English ethno-nationalism, 100%. 100%. The only problem is it doesn't have an intellectual form now. I tried to do this back in 2020. I was rejected because the internet white nationalist movement is a neo-Nazi cult. It's filled with gays and it's filled with Jews, and they gossip and they will reject you, and they don't want to debate, and they don't want to talk, and they don't want to think, and they'll just go no, and they're very locked. They're a group of people who are very locked in their set of opinions, and they're just utterly convinced that they're right, and they just can't think about anything else. So I mean, I tried, but I failed. But now the English people have spoken, and they're raising the English flag. And as I say, it's not an intellectual movement yet, but it's going to have to become one. And it will become one. And this debate that I tried to have with people back in 2020 about whether or not we should support Churchill or not, this is going to come back around, which is one of the reasons why I'm making this video. Because this is going to come back around. 100%. We need to get on top of this thing, and we need to get it right. We need to get it right. We cannot destroy this raise the flag movement with a bunch of retarded neo-Nazis posting the 14 words, or saying at least we're not speaking German, or trying to rally behind Oswald Mosley, and etc. 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 We cannot balls this up with any kind of pro-Hitler sentiment. This has to be very, very clear. This is about the English ethnicity raising itself up. It's not even about British ethnicity. It's the English ethnicity. And we're getting up off our knees, and we're proud to be English. It's not about being white. It's not about being white. I'm not against defining myself as white, and I'm not against being a white nationalist or a white ethno-nationalist or whatever. That's fine. But that's not what this is about. White is a broad category for the European people. Okay, so it's the English, it's the French, it's the Germans, it's the Spanish, it's the Slavic people, etc., etc. Okay, and you can debate about people on the fringes. Are the Greeks, are they still white, or are they well, they're kind of half Ottoman at this point, aren't they? But I mean, they're European, right? I'd say they're white. Some people like to get finicky and all picky about it. I think that's just fanatical and weird, to be honest with you. But white nationalism is a pan-nationalist movement. It's a race movement. It's not about the countries. It's not about the individual countries or the individual ethnicities. it's about the white race as a sum total, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. If I went to Africa with a French guy and a German, we'd be white, and the locals wouldn't look at us as an English guy, a French guy, and a German guy. They just see three white guys, right? So I don't have a problem with identifying as white. That's not an issue. But the problem is, if you're just a white nationalist that's concerned about white genocide, then you're going to ignore all the different individual sub-ethnicities and the nations that those sub-ethnicities have created and the struggles that they've had against each other, which is why in traditional ethno-nationalist circles you see, I don't know if you see this these days, but in the past, like, I used to make fun of the French, and I'd have like English white nationalists telling me, "Oh, you can't do that. Can't make fun of the French." And it's like, mate, I'm English. Like, it's my God-given duty to make fun of the French. Like, what are you talking about? It's not that I hate them. Obviously, I'm on the side of the French instead of the Pakistanis. Like duh. But I get things have probably changed. I mean, I don't watch all these. Like I said, I got kicked out of the movement, so I don't know what people are saying these days. But back like 5 years ago, if you were involved in white nationalist politics on the internet and you made fun of the French, or God forbid the Germans, right? The German master race. If you made fun of the German master race, people are saying, no more brother wars. You can't criticize other white ethnicities, blah 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 blah. And it's like, well, obviously I'm on their side against the rest of the world, but we've been fighting here in Europe. We've been fighting against each other for hundreds. Let me think. Since for thousands of years, right? We've been fighting against each other. Okay, the modern nations have taken birth recently, but before that, we've always been fighting against each other since the fall of the Roman Empire. And even during the Roman Empire, it was Rome against the Germanic people. So and that's good. That's healthy. It's good that we fight against each other because it keeps us strong. And it's one reason why there's so much creativity coming out of Europe, because we're not complacent. But that's our history. That's who we are. I'm not going to annihilate my history and just merge into the white race. That's absurd. But there has been a strong kind of pan-ethnic white nationalism floating around on the internet. Certainly, when I first got involved in this thing back in 2016, got involved in the alt-right, it was all just pan-ethnic white nationalism. And a lot of these people were pro-European Union. I mean, this is another reason why I got fed up with things back in 2020, because finally Boris managed to shove the Brexit thing through, and I thought there was going to be a big celebration. But a lot of people in England weren't even really that happy about it, because they weren't even really that much against the European Union. They were kind of in favour of it. Why? Because they're not English nationalists. They're white nationalists. They're European nationalists. And so they didn't mind being part of the European Union because they saw it as a pan-white nationalist political entity. You see, this is another reason why they like Oswald Mosley. Oswald Mosley, not an English ethno-nationalist. Not at all. He had a dream for a European Union. He called it something different, but he wanted it. He spent many years living in Ireland. He ended his life, as far as I understand it, living in France. And many of his supporters did support Adolf Hitler. So, and he was a fascist, following a fascist philosophy, and fascism comes from Italy. It's not an English way of looking at things. I'm not against fascism. For the Italians, I think Mussolini was a hero because he stopped his country being conquered by the communists. Unfortunately, we ended up fighting against him, but I like Mussolini. I like Franco. I think they're both good men. But it's an ideology which is for them. It's not for us. That's not our way of doing things. Fascism is a specifically Roman philosophy. The fasci is a Roman concept. The Heil Hitler Roman salute. It's the Roman salute. The fascist salute is a Roman salute. The concept of the dictator. is a Roman idea. Back in the old days of the Roman Republic, you would have a dictator. Cincinnati is the best example of this. There was a war. Cincinnati was a farmer. They brought him back. He won the war. He went back to farming. Okay, a great man, a great hero for the Romans. But it's just not really our way of doing things. I mean, the closest we came to it was Cromwell. I think didn't he call himself dictator general? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe he was inspired by the Romans. I don't know. Was Cromwell the first fascist in the modern era? I mean, you could make that argument. We did invent everything in this country, of course, didn't we? We invented that. We literally actually did invent everything. We invented the Reformation, right? Because it was it wasn't Tyndale's Bible, it was Wycliffe's Bible, wasn't it? The Morning Star of the Reformation was in England. And Wycliffe's Bible, and then the Hussite movement in Germany was inspired by Wycliffe's Bible. And then, of course, you have Martin Luther. And Martin Luther said, Ich bin ein Hussite. I am a Hussite. I'm a follower of John Huss. But John Huss was a follower of our rebellious, kind of anti-Catholic, proto-Reformation movement here in England. So it was the English race rebelling against Rome, Roman Catholicism. That's what it was. So we've always been a very individualistic and rebellious nation that's rebelled against Rome and rebelled against the continent. That is in our nature. And it's rather silly for English or so-called English ethno-nationalists to want to adopt the philosophy of a foreigner. We have our own tradition. So all of this is to say, I've kind of lost my train of thought a little bit here, but what I'm trying to say is that the flags have been raised, and what we are watching here is the birth of English ethno-nationalism, but it does not yet have an intellectual form. It has arisen spontaneously from the people. It's the Englishman raising the English flag, and we need to ensure that we protect this movement. We give it an intellectual backing, and we root it in English history, not in the history of the Germans, not in the history of Mussolini and the fascists, not in the history of the pan-European race. This is about being proud of being specifically English. It's not even about the Scottish or the Welsh or the Irish, because they've been our enemies for a long time as well. And again, I'm not anti-Welsh, I'm not anti-Scottish. Right, but let's clarify this, actually, because a lot of people in this country don't seem to be aware of the history of this whole thing. But why am I called Brutus the English? I'm called Brutus the English. I took the name Brutus. I tried to get rid of it, but I can't. I'm stuck with it. It's what I am. And actually, because for some time I got fed up with it, because I thought, I'm not Welsh. Why am I taking this name Brutus? I need an Anglo-Saxon name. But the fact of the matter is, the British Empire is named after Brutus. So I've reconciled myself with the name. I tried to rebel against it and rename myself Alfred last year, but that was just stupid. So anyway, why have I taken the name Brutus? I took the name Brutus because Brutus is the founder of Britain. The Britons are named after Brutus. Who is he? He's Brutus of Troy. He's written about in Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of England. And essentially he is the son or the grandson of Annius. No, I think he's the grandson of Annius. And he accidentally kills his father in a hunting accident. He gets Annius, of course, founded Rome. So he gets expelled from Rome, goes to Greece, finds some Greek refugees that had been enslaved in Greece after the fallout of the Trojan War. They have a slave revolt. They get on a boat. They get lost in the ocean. Brutus lies down. He sleeps in the Temple of Diana. In the Temple of Diana, he has a dream. He has a vision of the British conquering the world. Right? The British Empire, literally Diana gave this vision to Brutus. And so Brutus says, okay, and Diana tells him, go to this island. So Brutus says, okay. He lands down in Totnes in South Devon. You can see the Brutus stone. I've been there. I've seen it. He lands there and he gets out. England at that time, Britain at that time, is covered in giants. They kill all the giants. They take over. And that's it. That's the Britons. And he has 3 sons. And he divides the land up between his 3 sons. That is the origin of the threefold division of this island of ours into England, Scotland, and Wales. So this is all the mythological history of England. Now people dismiss this history, and they say, "Oh, this is just This is what I really dislike this. To be honest, I really, really dislike archaeologists who just want to tear down our myths. Sargon, in fact, talked about this recently, mythos and logos, and he's 100% correct. Mythos comes first. You have to have your story. You have to be part of a story. This is what's going to give your life meaning and purpose more than any kind of economic nonsense. You have to feel like you are part of a story which stretches back into legend and myth, and something which is transcendent and beyond this material world and beyond just money and power and grubby materialism. This is why you need to know the legend of Brutus of Troy, the founder of Britain, and Hengist and Horsa and all the rest of it. You need to know these stories and know them well. And it's amazing that many nationalists don't. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is, raising the flag, this is all about the English ethnicity. So on this island, there are 3 ethnicities. We've got the English. We are the descendants of Hengist and Horsa. Hengist and Horsa came from Denmark. So you've got the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. They came over to this country roughly 500 AD after the fall of the Roman Empire. After the Romans left, they came over, they conquered this country. Vortigern invited them in, specifically to defend the Britons from the Scottish. It wasn't even the Scottish at that time. It was the Caledonians, I think, who weren't actually Scottish. They were fellow Britons. They just lived in that land up there. And we did, and then we ended up taking over. But our heritage goes back through Hengist and Horsa into Denmark and ultimately up into Sweden and Uppsala and Odin. He is our ancestor. We are all the children of Odin, the children of Woden. And the same goes for the people of America and Canada and Australia and New Zealand. That's who we are. That is Odin. Woden is our mythological father. Now, of course, the Christians get all upset about this. I'm not even saying you have to believe in Woden. I don't really believe in Woden. It's a myth. It's a story. I'm sure back in some point in time there was some great king called Woden. Will we ever know who he was and what he did? Probably not. But we need the story. We have to celebrate the story. We can't just reject this. If you reject the story of where you came from, if you spit in the face of your ancestors, you'll be destroyed. If your history is destroyed, you will be destroyed because you won't know who you are. This is what's going on in the world today. The younger generation, they don't know their history. So what do they know? They know Marvel superhero movies. Complete garbage. Total rubbish. A weird 20th century science fiction story. Because that's essentially, in my opinion, superhero movies are a subgenre of science fiction. So, created by a Jew called Stan Lee. Weird sense of morality. Weird vigilante. People flying around in capes. And well, they don't have capes, actually, in Marvel, to be fair. That's a DC thing. But you know what I mean. Behaving like teenagers. They don't get married. They don't have kids. They never die. And it's multicultural and strange and American and utopian and whatever. I mean, young people, I mean, it may seem like a stupid thing to say, a stupid exaggeration to say, but I don't know. I mean, I work in a factory and there are people there and they're like, oh, cool, did you see this Marvel superhero movie? And it's like, no, I didn't. It's shite. But in their heads, they've got these images and these ideas and these stories in their heads. And these stories affect the way that they think about the world. So your average English man should have the story of Hengist and Horsa and Brutus of Troy and Arthur and Alfred and Ethelstan and Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth, the original one, and all of this. They should have all of this in their head, and all of the moral conflicts and so on and so forth that go along in all these stories. They should have these stories in their head, forming their character and forming and guiding the way that they act and behave. Because I think all stories give you moral lessons. I mean, I've just been thinking quite a lot actually about Alfred and burning the cakes, because I burn the cakes a lot. Because we all know the story. Alfred, he fought in a battle, he lost, he had to run, he was taking shelter in an old lady's cabin in the woods, and she didn't know he was the king, and she asked him to watch the cakes, and he was supposed to be watching the cakes, but he was thinking about the war and all of this, and he burnt the cakes, and the old woman came home and she told him off, right? This is a story of my life. Like, the number of times I'm at work and I make a mistake at work because I'm thinking about history and politics and what's going on in the world, and I make some dumb mistake at work, doing some trivial thing which is easy, but my mind's on other things, right? And I've been doing this for years, and it doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes it happens, right? And now it's like, oh, I'm like Alfred. I'm literally like Alfred the Great. Right? This is what happened to him. So there's a story there, and you can take that story from history, that myth, that legend, and you can like see it in your own life. And so now you're kind of like more connected to England and its history. But what the powers that be that rule this world, what they want is just to fill your head with superhero crap, right? And Aliens and the Terminator and Transformers and all the rest of it, all the rest of the Hollywood garbage. We've been living through 10 or 15 years of the worst Hollywood nonsense, like a real just collapse in creativity. It's been awful. The millennial generation is just, they are some of the consumers of some of the worst, consumers and celebrators of some of the worst garbage that the human race has ever created, and their heads are just filled with this nonsense. So, and they like to make fun of the boomers, but at least the boomers made some good movies, or were able to appreciate good movies. I hate the boomers like anybody else, but come on, that millennial generation, it was awful. I'm not millennial. I'm on the cusp, Gen X. But the whole rise of nerd culture, I think, I'm going on a massive tangent here, but it has to be said. The rise of nerd culture has been a disaster for mankind. And that's a quote. You can take that one home. Write it on the wall. But I watched this happen because I remember in the 90s, nerd culture was still, kept down a little bit. I played Warhammer 40k when I was a teenager. I'd read comics when I was a teenager. But it was still like, it was a bit laughable. It was a bit childish. It was a bit like, oh, you read comics, do you? Or you play war games, do you? That's a bit nerdy. It wasn't a very like manly thing to be celebrated, right? They still had a strong jock culture, as the Americans would call it. And I remember through the first decade of this century, through the noughties, I remember the rise of Zuckerberg, essentially, and the rise of this celebration of comics. We're going to celebrate the comics now. We're going to celebrate nerd culture. This is all millennials pushing this through. Zuckerberg was a millennial, right? Zuckerberg went to work, didn't wear a suit and tie, just wore t-shirts and jeans. And he was a nerd. He was proud to be a nerd. And there was it was the rise of Silicon Valley, and the rise of nerdy people that coded computers, and now they're all billionaires. It was a whole big thing. It was the victory of the nerds. That's how the 21st century started. The victory of the nerds. And what's the result of that? Woke culture. Woke culture. Because the jocks got pushed to the side. Right? I mean, I'm not wrong, am I? Marvel superhero movies. And garbage. And the semi-collapse of Western civilization. So anyway, the point I'm making is, but it's being reversed now because the Zoomers are coming along and they're all fans of Andrew Tate, right? And I'm not a fan of Andrew Tate, but whatever. Better Andrew Tate than Mark Zuckerberg, I guess. But there's a rejection of all this now. The young Zoomer men at least are much more serious and much more masculine because they have to be, and they're laughing at the millennials now, and this is very good. I'm very happy that people are finally laughing at the millennials and pointing out how fucking retarded they are, or they were, in their cultural high time. And millennial culture is being torn down because the woke thing is a millennial thing, and I've been swept up as well. We're going on a massive tangent here, but I've been swept up as well in this whole boomer hatred thing. Because I hate the boomers, and there are issues there. But boomer culture was kind of cool. Right? Let's at least give them that. The 60s and 70s culture was kind of cool. Millennial culture was shite. Alright? It was just mostly shite. And the millennials hate the boomers. And it's good that the millennials are finally... You know, they're blaming everything on the boomers, but woke culture is millennial culture. It is. I'm not wrong, am I? Am I wrong? Is woke culture, is the woke mind virus a boomer thing? No. Do we have woke boomers walking around places? No. How have the boomers always reacted to woke culture? They've always just laughed at it and said it's just stupid millennials. Right? And so I just think, I know I'm going on a tangent here, but I've put so much hatred into the boomers, and I'm just scratching my head and wondering if it's a good idea, because you are teaching generations to hate each other. And although I think the boomers are obnoxious and they have hoarded all the wealth, at the same time, the real problem, the housing crisis has been caused by mass immigration. It's not been caused by the boomers. And when the boomers were given a chance, they voted for Trump and they voted for Brexit. Okay, I'm just putting that out there. And the boomers are not woke, and they've never been woke. And they've always made fun of the woke. It's the millennials that were woke. Right? Am I wrong? Am I wrong? So it's like, you want to blame the boomers for all of society's problems? Well, blame the immigrants, right? Because the left wing is capable of jumping on a trend and turning it in a certain direction. They see a lot of anger out there for the ways that the society is, and so now they want to redirect the anger towards white boomers instead of where the anger should be going, which is foreigners, mass immigration. So we've got to be very careful about falling for the boomer trap. But anyway, that's a massive tangent. I mean, who's raising the flag? Well, I guess this video is supposed to be about raising the flag. But I mean, who's raising the flag? Are the boomers against this? Or are the boomers for it? I think most of the boomers are for it. In fact, we've got grannies out there protesting against migrant hotels. So, yeah, with this whole Operation Raise the Flag, perhaps we should just keep a lid on the boomer vote. Keep a lid on the boomer hatred. Because I'm saying this because I feel I've been guilty of this myself, and I just starting to think maybe it's just not helpful, actually, because the boomers are with us, right? Is it really helpful to hate your parents and your grandparents? Is it really hate? Do we really want to blame it all on them? Or do we want to blame it all on the foreigners? Is this a left-wing? Because intergenerational hate is very much a left-wing idea. And I do feel like, I'm just starting to feel like on the dissident right, I've kind of like maybe swallowed a bit too much of this there are different generations, and they do have different qualities, and there are a lot of bad things you could say about the boomers, but is it good to hate your parents and your grandparents? Really? Like, is that really a good idea to fall into that trap? Or should we be directing our anger somewhere else? Okay? Because the whole boomer hatred thing boils down to the housing crisis. That's what's really at the bottom of it. You can't buy a house. Is that really... Why can't you buy a house? Is that the boomers' fault, or is that the fault of immigrants? You know what I'm saying? But anyway, tangent over. Let's get back to this raise a flag thing. What am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say the English... I was trying to make a point about the English. This is the birth of English ethno-nationalism. We need to make sure that the neo-Nazis don't spoil this with their Germanic nationalism. We need to keep the 14 words out of this. We need to keep the Heil Hitler out of this. We need to keep Oswald Mosley out of this. We need to keep jokes about... Why do I say the 14 words specifically? In case you don't know, 14 words was created by an American neo-Nazi called David Lane, who was involved in all kinds of crime and ended up in prison. And he's a Nazi. And do we really want to associate the movement with Nazism? You got Steve Laws all repeatedly on the internet typing 14 words, 14 words. Why? What is the point? Why bother? It's an American slogan. Stop it. Why? I mean, what is the value in connecting your budding ethno-nationalist movement with an American neo-Nazi who's in jail? Is this what the English public... Are the British public going to rally behind David Lane, the neo-Nazi? Are they? So, well, the answer is no. You already know the answer. Like, those people that are outside on the streets, right, protesting against migrant hotels, are they going home and thinking, David Lane, if only... If only people listen to David Lane. Is that what they're thinking? No. Stop posting the 14 words then. Please. Can we finally get this lesson through the retarded brains of people who have just been spent too long on the internet in their gay, retarded, neo-Nazi cult? Can you finally learn this lesson? Okay? As I said before, I've got a massive chip on my shoulder. This was a big point that we argued back in 2020. I made many videos. Stop using the 14 words. You know who was using the 14 words back in 2020? A weird Indian who went by the name of Ralph. Creepy Indian Ralph. What happened to that guy? God knows. But he was an Indian. He joined the Patriotic Alternative. And he just told everyone to post the 14 words everywhere. Right? Why? Because he knew it was destructive. Okay, and in the end, it turned out that he was some kind of spy or whatever, and he doxed a whole bunch of people, and the whole thing was a massive disaster. And I called it out. I was proven right. Does anybody listen to me? No. But that's the way the world is. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is, here on the British Isles... Oh, yeah, I got into this because it's got to be the English flag, not the British flag. And I love the Scottish and I love the Irish. But there has been an ancient ethnic conflict between us for a long, long time, and it has to be acknowledged. We, the English, are not the Welsh. The Welsh people are Britons. They are the descendants of Brutus of Troy. They are the original inhabitants of this island. They were conquered by the Romans. The Romans then left. Then the Germanic Saxons came in. We became the English. We became known as the English because Aethelstan crowned himself King of the English. But we are not Britons. When we've bred with these people for a long time, but and we named our empire after them, but they are not us. And I actually think we get on with the Welsh quite well, to be honest with you, because we've been together for such a long time. You don't have the same antagonism that we have with the Scottish and the Irish. But there's a little bit of antagonism there. But with the Scottish don't like us. Scottish people and Irish people, they're the same people, in case you don't know this. The Irish and the Scottish, they are the Gaelic people. They have a different mythology. They trace their heritage back to Goidel Glass and Queen Scotia. That's why the Scottish are called Scottish. The Gaelic people invaded Scotland roughly at the same time that Hengist and Horsa came over and invaded England. So the Scottish people are actually newcomers. Well, they got here at the same time as we did, to be honest with you. The coast of Argyll means the Gaelic coast. So the Irish came over, conquered Scotland, and then called it Scotland. But they're fundamentally Irish people. And then, of course, Longshanks went up there, crushed them, and he took the stone of Scone, brought it down, and then since then English kings have been crowned on the stone of Scone. But the stone of Scone originally comes from Tara. It is an Irish stone. It is the Gaelic stone on which the Irish kings would be crowned. The point I'm trying to get at here is that there is an ongoing ethnic conflict in the British Isles between the English and the Welsh and the Scottish. The Scottish are not really our friends. And I don't hate them. Let me just make it clear. I want the island to be united. I want there to be a new king. We've got to get rid of our current king. Totally worthless. We need a king's moot. And we need to elect a king by referendum. And he has to be a great man. Or we could just... what is Kate Middleton's son called? Do you know, I forget his name. Is it Jamie? I forget his name. There you go. But we need to skip over William and go to one of his sons and make one of his sons king and get a fresh start. Or if the British public don't want that, then whoever becomes prime minister and cleans this mess up, he can become king. Whatever which way we do it, we need a new king. But the new king, ideally, we need to reconquer Ireland, and the king should marry an Irish girl, and he should be crowned High King of Ireland. And in this way, the British Isles can be united, and the Irish will finally be pacified after 1,000 years of warfare. So that's my solution to that problem. Okay, so I'm not anti-Irish. I do think it is a great crime that we starve them in the potato famine. And I don't know if it's a conspiracy or not, but they were our people. We were ruling over them, and we allowed them to starve, and that is very, very shameful. And I think they're fully justified in their anger against us for this, and it should be recognized. So I'm not anti-Irish, and we should stand together as a white race, but it's also got to be acknowledged that these people have got a chip on their shoulder. Lord Haha was Irish. Okay, I just had a conversation with somebody on Twitter a few weeks ago. He's an English guy, and he's made his profile picture Lord Haha. Okay? Irish. Why? An Irish man born in America, got a chip on his shoulder, doesn't like England, joins the Nazis, fights against the English. They're not our friends. Tony Blair was Scottish. You don't see people talking about this enough. He was a Scot. Gordon Brown, a Scot. Our country was ruined by a Scot. Why aren't people talking about this more? Why aren't people acknowledging this? The ethno-nationalists won't acknowledge this because they're blind to the subtleties of British, the three ethnicities that live on this island. The English, the Welsh, and the Irish. They're blind to it because all they see is the pan-Europa and the white race as a whole. This is why you talk to many ethno-nationalists and they say we should give Northern Ireland back to the Irish. Well, why are we going to betray all the Englishmen that live in Northern Ireland? Why are you betraying your own kin? Why are you siding with the Irish against the English? What are you doing, you retard? But they can't think about this because they're stuck in a neo-Nazi cult. So these things need to be discussed. These things need to be talked about. We need to build an intellectual foundation for English ethno-nationalism, a real English ethno-nationalism, without the fascism, without Adolf Hitler, without Irish people interfering. It needs to be about the English flag. And if we can win this, and I think we will, because the flag's gone up and it's not coming down now. It's not coming down. If we can win this, then we can quite literally save the world. with this movement, Raise the English Flag, if we build an intellectual force behind this. Because we can say to the Canadians, you're English, and you can get them to raise the flag. And we can say it to the Australians, and we can say it to the New Zealanders. These people do not have a chip on their shoulder like the Americans do. But the truth of the matter is, I've only got 10 minutes. I like to only speak for an hour. The truth of the matter is, this world is being ruined and destroyed by America. The world was a better place when the British Empire ruled the world. But Roosevelt bankrupted us. Roosevelt gave all that money to Stalin, but he bankrupted us, and he wanted to take over. And also, again, Scottish, the Labour Party, founded by a Scot. What's his name? MacDonald, whatever. I forget his name. But look into it. Ramsay MacDonald. Scottish Labour Party. It's full of Scots. They made fun of it. People have made fun of this for years, but for some reason, ethno-nationalists don't get it. But anyway, Scottish Labour Party, chip on their shoulder. They give away the empire. Attlee gives away the empire. Attlee himself was English, but whatever. They give away the empire. This is not Churchill's fault. But anyway, the point I'm making is that the world was a better place when it was ruled by the British Empire. But the Americans have taken this empire from us, and we self-destructed, we imploded, and now America is ruining the world with its sexual revolution. America is a satanic nation. It is a Masonic nation. The Washington City, on the streets of Washington City, there is a 5-starred pentagram. You use a pentagram to raise demons. This goes all the way back to Francis Bacon, the father of science. Francis Bacon wrote a book, New Atlantis, and he talks about. So he didn't actually say King Solomon's temple, but he's like Salaman. He uses a different phrasing for Solomon, but Salaman's. You see, Francis Bacon is the father of science, but he's also the father of science fiction. Nobody recognizes it, but I do. But he talks about Salaman, like a temple, and it's full of mad scientists, essentially. Okay, and the mad scientist is just the wizard archetype, essentially, but with science instead. And obviously Francis Bacon, and he was hanging out with John Dee, and they were doing magic. And in that period, basically, science came from alchemy. It came from magic, right? And they were talking to demons, summoning demons, and talking to them, and they were giving them their secrets and whatever. But the point I'm trying to make is, they were doing all this stuff, and pentagrams were involved, and pentagrams are used for raising demons. Marlowe wrote about Faust at this time, and he describes the pentagram, how the pentagram is used to raise this demon, and the demon gives you all kinds of knowledge. The Freemasons picked this up later on. They used pentagrams, they worshipped the Baphomet. The Freemasons caused the American Revolution. And so you have the 5-pointed star on the American flag. You have a 5-pointed star carved into the streets of Washington, D.C. The English flag is not a 5-pointed star. It is a Celtic cross. It is a good symbol. But symbols matter. If the symbol of your nation is a pentagram, then you are a demoniac nation. And you're going to go down. There's only one other country in the world that uses the pentagram, and that's Islam. They were the first. America was the second, and then there are many other Masonic revolutions since then. They also all raised the pentagram. So our country, our world is being consumed by demons. They worship demons. I mean, I'm not trying to be a crazy guy here, but this is what's going on. Like, they worship demons. That's why nothing good will ever come out of Washington. And this is why the whole of America, they've got daddy issues. They are in denial of their ancestors. Like I was just saying earlier in this video, you have to know who you are. Mythos before logos. You have to be able to look way, way, way back into the past, and your ancestor has to be transcendent. If you do not have this, then you're just going to be materialistic, and your mythos will be a Marvel superhero movie, right? So America is the epitome of this. They've all got daddy issues. They think their country began in 1776. They cannot acknowledge, they know that they're English, but they're in denial of it. And so they don't know who they are. Their identity is not stable. And so they cling to the Constitution. So they become a nation of ideas, a revolutionary nation of ideas, like the original civic nationalist nation, essentially. And it worked for some time because white people are there, and there's a big country, and there are a lot of Christians, and they were masculine, and so America blossomed. But these ideas have caught up now. It's been mixed with cultural Marxism, and they're just spewing anti-ancestor, civic nationalist, feminist, gay, revolutionary bile all across the entire world. They're poisoning the whole world with their rhetoric. And all the time they're doing it, the neo-Nazis that live there are trying to blame this all on Churchill. Churchill was just trying to maintain the British Empire. The world was a much better place when the British Empire ruled the world. So it's kind of a case of just Americans not being able to acknowledge how much damage they've done to this world in the post-war period. They just can't admit it. And so they want to blame Churchill. And then you've got a bunch of English people just sitting there because they're getting donations on the internet from Americans, right? You watch any YouTuber, they're all like, oh, thank you for the donation from the American. So they want to keep the American audience happy. And so what I'm trying to say here is that the world is being poisoned by America. The only thing that can save America is the English. But we can't do it unless we ourselves stand up. We have to get off our knees. We have to stop worshipping Adolf Hitler. We have to formulate our own English ethno-nationalism and celebrate it. Then we can get Canada and Australia and New Zealand online, and then we can get the Americans online, and then we can fix everything. We have to get the Americans to raise the English flag, essentially, is what I'm saying. This raise the English flag movement needs to go international in the Anglosphere. It needs to be an Anglosphere movement. I'm just laying it down here. I said all this back in 2020. Nobody listened. Well, here we are, back again. Proven right. Brutus the English. Okay? Yes, I've got a massive chip on my shoulder. 100%. But I've been proven right. And nobody listens. And so, that's frustrating, right? But, oh my God. Hang on. Computer's closed. Oh my God. But that's about an hour. So there's my video. That's what I wanted to say. And we've just one last point. Everything I'm saying is in line with Jonathan Bowden. I just took Jonathan Bowden's conclusions to the ultimate point. I took Julius Evola. I make fun of Julius Evola all the time. I quite like Evola, but I get frustrated because there's so many people on the internet worshipping Julius Evola, but they don't understand him at all. They don't understand him. They're not taking their own philosophy to its ultimate conclusion. Even Bowden didn't. I'm just taking Jonathan Bowden's philosophy to his ultimate conclusion. What did Bowden say? He did a lecture. He was talking about Stalin. Right, I'm going to make another video about this because I'm having an argument with somebody about it right now, but I'll just end on this point. He was making a video. He was talking about Stalin, and he was talking about the Russians, how they never fell into the trap of hating Stalin because they knew that if they fell into the trap of hating Stalin, it would open up their own. First of all, you're opening the door to self-hatred. Secondly, you're opening the door for foreigners to insult your country, right? So you'd have the whole of Eastern Europe demanding reparations from Russia. Is the whole of Eastern Europe demanding reparations from Russia? No. Why not? Because the Russians aren't listening. That door is closed. They're not apologizing for Stalin. They haven't fallen for that trap. Are we in England? Are we being bombarded with people demanding reparations for Churchill, essentially? Yeah. Are we falling for it? Yeah. Because we're stupid. But Bowden quoted Evelyn and he said, you should always celebrate the warrior. Stalin saved Russia from the Nazi invasion. So he's a hero for the Russians, and that's just it. That is what it is. Was he a monster? Yes. He was a horrible person. Total psychopath. but he saved the nation. So he's the monster that saved the nation. I mean, and then that's it. You just got to shrug your shoulders and move on. So this is what Bowden said, and I just thought about this so much, and I took it to the ultimate conclusion. I said, well, why are we apologizing for Churchill? Why are we groveling on the floor apologizing for Dresden? This is a huge mistake. It's just leading to self-hatred, and it's leading to a bunch of neo-Nazi Americans criticizing us for being the Jews of Europe and so on and so forth. And nationalists in England are just lapping it up. And it's embarrassing. It is embarrassing to see people calling for English people saying, oh, we should pay reparations to the Germans for Dresden. Like, what are you talking about? This is the most wormy, pathetic thing I've ever heard of in my entire life. But the English ethno-national movement is, what so-called English ethno-nationalist movement is just full of people like this. It has to go. We have to cast all of this aside. Hitler started that war. And it was not in our interests to allow the Germans to build an empire in Europe. We were the dominant superpower of the world, and it wasn't in our interests. And everything went pear-shaped for sure, but we didn't know Germany would side with the Soviet Union against Poland. We didn't know that would happen. And we didn't know that France would collapse so easily. And we didn't know that the Americans would stab us in the back and bankrupt us. We didn't know these things would happen. And we tried to avoid the war, but Hitler wanted it anyway. And so, what has happened has happened. It's a difficult thing to defend. It's actually easier for the Russians to defend Stalin than it is for us to defend Churchill, in a way. Because at least Stalin actually won the war and built the huge Soviet empire out of it, right? Whereas we won the war but essentially lost the empire. So it's very difficult to defend Churchill. But if you start tearing him down, you're tearing down a British icon. My grandfather fought in the Second World War, and so did many other people's grandparents fight in the Second World War. You're going to go up to them and tell them that their grandfather was stupid? It's such a deep insult to the most patriotic people of this country, the soldiers. God Almighty, we need the soldiers of this country to do something now more than any other time. And yet you're just insulting them. There are regiments all around the country, and they've all got their war stories from the Second World War. And you're just insulting these people. It's the most retarded thing possible. But anyway, all right, I've said enough. Right, thank you for listening. And please do like the video. Share the video. Share it on Twitter. There's a lot of people out there. They say, oh, I love what you're saying. It's brilliant. Do you share my videos on Twitter? How many of you actually do that? Right? Not trying to be an arsehole, but this is a word of mouth thing. If you don't share it with your friends, if you don't post this video on Twitter, then nobody will watch it. Okay? So to all the people that say they love my videos, I don't know, it's click, 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 share, right? Not trying to be an arsehole, but I'm just saying, that's all you got to do, right? But anyway, thank you very much for listening. God bless.